Hey everyone, it's Dr. Tyler. I trust that you are all keeping safe and staying well. This is our update for the week of April 15th, 2020. And as life changes and as we hopefully adapt, it is my intention that these can serve some degree of connectivity for the community that we share within the hands-on health practice, as I've missed it greatly, and as I'm sure some of you have too. But more alarmingly, as I've seen this sort of sense of isolation and mine ripple out into the community at large. So last week I was standing online to get into Trader Joe's, and I watched an elderly woman in a walker approach the line. And I could see the people who were first, the people that had been waiting there the longest, from behind their masks, their eyes start to dart around, right? And just trying to make eye contact to connect with someone, as if to say, can we please let this woman go first, right? Before the manager tells her to go all the way back around the side of the store and get at the end of the line, can we let this lady in? And unfortunately, that didn't happen, right? No one said a word, myself included. And they sent her to the end of the line, and fortunately I did see her in the store a few minutes later. But I think we can do better. And I think it's time to get back to that golden rule of treat others the way we'd like to be treated. So if we can help someone and if we can pay something forward, I urge you to do that with the hope and the intention that it will come back to us when and in the manner that we need, for ourselves. That is kind of the law of giving and receiving. But as we started doing these e-discussions, right, or these video mails or telechiro, whatever we want to call them, our first few were about safety, right? There's so much going on. How do I navigate this? How do I stay safe? And then we began to talk about what we were doing to keep you safe in the practice, right? Navigating, is it safe to come get my spine checked or not? And now these have almost evolved into a virtual discussion. So for a lot of the practice members, they may remember that we used to do health talks, right? 1 or 2 a week. In addition to our regular orientation, we used to do a discussion. We'd come in after hours and sit down and talk about life, health, healing, well-being, consciousness, talk about something stimulating to keep us growing in regards to how we perceive ourselves and our relationship with the community and our relationship with our health. So, for a lot of years, I struggled with how do we get people to come to these talks. And this is almost a beautiful and perfect marriage, because now you have the opportunity to listen at your leisure or put me on in the background or mute me when I'm saying something obnoxious, and here we are. So if these have been helpful, please continue to tune in. I'm going to try and do one a week. And if there's anything, if you have questions, feel free to comment, email me, text me, call me, or if you'd like to see anything addressed particularly, let us know, and we'll try to get it in the next one, or if not, the one after that. So if you are viewing this in the email, you've probably noticed there's a box above me, right? There's a little black box that says, I'm going to tell you something that makes you uncomfortable. And it's just a really cute animated little exercise about how we perceive different ideas. And since there is so much information coming at us from so many angles right now, I thought it was relevant to kind of fine-tune the BS detector, but also get an idea of the process that our brain goes through when we get exposed to different information. And it's relevant because I know I talk about all sorts of different things, right? Just in the last few weeks, if you've been watching the videos, we've talked about investing in health versus responding to the lack of it. We've talked about the relationship between stress and dis-ease. We've talked about proactive and reactive healthcare. We've talked about this healthcare sick care paradigm, and sort of looked at where our healthcare system falls and what we can do to round out our personal healthcare regimes. And it's not my intention to say what's right or wrong, but to provoke thought. So getting acquainted with how your brain handles new ideas is particularly functional, and as I said, it's a fun exercise. So if you want to pause me, go click on that thing up there. It takes just a few minutes. Come back and we'll get into our material for this week. So the other reason we've been doing the videos is that in most realms, doctor means teacher, right? If we go to college, we sit in a class with a PhD professor, they're our teacher. Even in regards to healthcare, we trust doctors to teach us about health and about our body. So as a chiropractor, we have this philosophy of life, health, healing, well-being, the relationship between the spine and the nervous system, and how it affects those other things. So it's one of our jobs is to teach this philosophy, right, and to teach how we can integrate it into our own personal healthcare regime for maximum benefit. And I know that I said I was done with coronavirus, right? However, the coronavirus has been mentioned 3,000% more in our media than any other illness, pandemic, or sickness in history. So we have to address it. We know it's being mentioned 3,000% more because we're inundated with it. But what we're not talking about is that there has been absolutely zero mention of what we can do to maintain our body's ability for health and healing, right? So that's where our job comes in. And on that note, historically, there have been two models of how we look at the relationship between illness and health. And I think in the first video we talked about the seed versus the soil debate, and this is kind of what we're getting into. So there is the germ theory that we all know, right? It is the absolute bedrock foundation of our healthcare system. It states that essentially a germ, virus, bacteria, fungus, prion, protein, something from outside gets in us and makes us sick. This was founded by Louis Pasteur in France in the 17th century or the 14th century. That's irrelevant, but my point is it's an outside-in philosophy of health. But there was a rival theory, right? There was a cellular theory championed by an individual named Béchamp. And that theory states that, germs are found everywhere in nature, right? And usually exist in a symbiotic relationship with that environment, right? So in nature, we see that bacteria and germs and fungus break stuff down, right? They help decaying matter break down. The tree that's fallen in the forest gets broken down by bacteria and insects and becomes a host for new life. But the same goes in the body, right? We have over 300 types of bacteria in our colon that are responsible for completing digestion, absorbing vitamins, balancing our body chemistry, and keeping potentially harmful bacteria under control. So even within us, there can be and frequently is a symbiotic nature between germs and physiology, right? There are some figures that say we have hundreds of trillions of bacteria and virus in us, right? More virus and bacteria than we have cells that make up our own body. So the other thing that this cellular theory states is that symptoms arise as a sign of dysfunction or susceptibility. So if you think about the fever we were talking about a few videos ago, right? The fever is generated because there's an invader in the blood. The invader in the blood got there because our body was susceptible and was not able to fight it off in the first place. And that the fever is designed to regulate the system, right? So again, my goal here is not to tell you what's right or wrong, but it's present two different discussions and allow you to find your truth in them, right? That's why the oatmeal thing is so much fun. But one of the most compelling ideas behind this cellular theory is that in order to prevent disease, we must create health. And that sounds a whole lot like something we've been talking about over the last few weeks. This, in the same sense, right, we can say you cannot force out darkness, we can only bring in light, right? We can't force out disease, we can only bring in life. And in our culture, there are very few absolutes, right? We say silence is the absence of sound. We say darkness is the absence of light. Those are absolutes. We never turn them around. We never go like, I don't see any darkness, so this thing must be light. No, light is light. It is the entity. It is an absolute. So when we apply this to health and to the body, if we take into consideration that most of us come into the world healthy, that our bodies are designed to maintain and function in a state of health, I think health should be the entity, right? However, we define illness, or we define healthcare as the lack of disease and symptomatology, right? We go, if I can't find anything wrong, if nothing hurts or aches and all the levels are normal, you must be healthy by default. To which I say BS, right? Rather than defining health as the absence of disease, I say we do what this says, and we define disease as the absence of adequate health. Because as our level of health drops, we open the door of susceptibility to all the things in our environment that we're exposed to all the time anyway, right? So chiropractic is an inside-out model, right? We say in chiropractic above, down, inside, out. And we do that because we acknowledge and respect the way the body was designed to function to maintain a state of health, right? We turn over 50 million cells a minute to continually replace old, worn-out ones with new, fresh, healthy, living, functioning ones. And strengthening and supporting the inherent animation within us, right? Life within us is paramount, because when we're done being animated, it doesn't matter what we put in the system, what we rub on the system, what we inject into the system, it's not going to change it. So for as long as we're alive, we have the ability to influence and to invest in our body's capacity to continually recreate itself in a state of health, healing, and well-being. And when we begin to look at this in a different manner, it becomes a continuum, right? And health is not just this light switch that's either on or off, we're healthy or we're not. It's a continuum where we put health, healing, and well-being, growing on one end, and disease, illness, decay, degeneration, and all the other stuff on the other end. Everything we do, everything we encounter, everything we experience is going to move us from one end to the other, right? And chances are there's going to be a lot of motion in both directions throughout the course of a day, kind of like a big expense account. There's going to be deposits, there's going to be withdrawals. However, we define health as being right in the middle, right? The absence of symptoms. Maybe it could be better, but it could be a whole lot worse. We must be healthy. To which I and chiropractic have always said BS, right? If we want to invest in our well-being, we should pursue better health all the time. And if we don't want to be susceptible to the germs that we're going to encounter in our environment, we should be pursuing better health. So I'm going to give you one other example that will hopefully illustrate this idea of, hey, how can you and I sit at the same table, eat the same food, share the same germs, and one of us gets sick and one of us not? So I want you to picture a big bucket, teeming with fluid, right, about to overflow. And in that bucket represents our vital capacity, all of that animation that we just spoke of, all of our capacity to heal, grow, digest, defend ourselves, and do everything else we do. So all of the good things we do, right, all of the food, the positive thought, the good clean water, the exercise, the fresh air, all the things we've been talking about investing in health adds to our bucket, right, adding to our vital capacity for performance. But all the stress in our life produce cracks, holes, fissures, and things in the bottom of the bucket where that vitality can leak out, right? And some of these things we can change, some of these things we can't. We have no control over our age. We have no control over our water quality to some degree. We have no control over the air we breathe, although that seems to be changing as life has calmed down a little bit. But we can change a whole lot of other ones, right? We can decide whether or not we smoke cigarettes. We can decide what type of food we put in us. We can decide what type of things we clean our home with. So we can decide, how we even perceive the stress in our life. And the goal with this bucket is that as the level drops, we become more susceptible to things, right? And if the level drops a little bit more, perhaps that susceptibility means one of those germs we share over dinner gets to hang around for a little bit, right? Maybe it stays in the back of our throat for a few days while our immune system figures out what to do with it. Perhaps with even less fluid in our bucket, that germ creates illness, right? And if we keep going, maybe that illness turns into pneumonia, and perhaps it gets to the point of no return where our body's no longer capable of healing or regulating itself to get us back on course. So the video below me, right, we talked about the one above, now we're going to talk about the one below, is from an individual by the name of Bruce Lipton. And he is one of the foremost cell biologists in the world. He's also a champion of this idea called epigenetics, which deals with how and why our genes get expressed in the way that they do. The really relevant thing about Bruce Lipton and about this video is that he's going to talk about the relationship between the effects of chronic stress and our body's ability to heal, right? Specifically, we're going to talk about whether or not we can be in growth and defense at the same time. So it illustrates our point beautifully, and it ties into a lot of the things we've been discussing. It even ties into this idea of perception and that thing you read about up top. So take a few minutes. Please watch. I think it's incredibly informative. Let me know what you think. If there's anyone in your life who you think may benefit from it, please share it. Pass it along to them. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're on the email list. We're going to keep these coming. And until the next one, stay safe, be well. We'll talk to you soon.